The sound of boots grew louder, breaking the still silence of the forest. Ilara steadied her breath. Though her body ached with every movement, her eyes narrowed as she prepared for whoever stepped through the brush. The giant horse remained beside her, its muscles taut, its ears flicking toward the noise as if ready to spring at the slightest sign of threat. And then the first figure appeared. A man in dark clothing emerged from the trees, his rifle slung across his chest and his gaze sharp and suspicious. Two more followed behind him, their boots sinking into the damp soil with steady rhythm. These were not rangers or allies. Their uniforms bore no insignia, only worn fabric and weapons, carried with ease that betrayed experience. Ilara recognized them at once as poachers, the very kind she had been tracking in these mountains before she fell into the abandoned snare. The lead poacher froze when his eyes fell upon her, standing battered and armed only with a knife, and then his gaze slid to the massive horse looming over her. His face twisted with surprise, then greed, for he saw not just a ranger in distress, but a prize in the form of the enormous beast beside her. He muttered something to the others, and their laughter echoed coldly through the trees. Ilara tightened her grip on the knife, though her strength wavered. She knew she could not fight three armed men. Her only hope was the animal that stood by her side. The horse pawed the ground as though sensing the intent of the newcomers, its breath loud and steady, its stance protective. Ilara realized the bond had grown beyond coincidence. The creature had chosen to stand against every danger that had come, and now faced a threat greater than wolves. The lead poacher raised his rifle slowly, not aiming yet, but testing the reaction of the ranger and the horse. His lips curled into a mocking grin as he called out words dripping with arrogance. He spoke of the worth of such a beast, how many buyers would pay fortunes. For something so massive and rare, Ilara's stomach turned with fury, for she knew their greed would not stop until either she or the horse was gone. The horse snorted loudly, stamping its hoof with such force the men flinched despite themselves. Ilara seized the moment to step forward, knife raised, though her hand trembled. She shouted back, warning them to leave while they still had the chance. But the men only laughed harder, their rifles lifting higher until the threat became undeniable. The forest itself seemed to shrink under the tension. One of the poachers swung his rifle fully into aim, his finger brushing the trigger. Ilara felt her chest tighten, her mind racing with the certainty of what was about to happen, and before she could move, the horse surged forward in a blur of power, its massive body covering the ground between them with impossible speed. The men staggered back in shock as the beast reared high, its shadow swallowing them whole. The lead poacher fired the crack of the shot, splitting the airbirds exploding from the trees in fright. Ilara ducked instinctively, expecting pain, but none came. Instead, she saw the horse twist mid-rear. Avoiding the bullet as though guided by instinct, the shot tore into the bark of a tree, spraying splinters across the clearing. The men cursed, fumbling to ready another round, but the horse was already upon them. Its hooves crashed down, forcing the poachers to scatter. One fell backward, dropping his rifle into the mud. Another scrambled to reload his weapon, his hands shaking as the towering animal bore down on him. Ilara gritted her teeth and lunged toward the fallen rifle, kicking it farther out of reach before the poacher could recover it. Her body burned with pain, but adrenaline drove her forward. The poachers regrouped, circling warily around both ranger and horse. Their greed tempered now by the reality of what they faced, yet they did not retreat. Their leader barked orders, his voice sharp and commanding. He was determined to claim victory, even if it meant blood. Ilara knew the confrontation was far from over, and that her survival depended on the choices she made in the next few moments. The horse snorted again, its eyes flashing with wild determination. Ilara glanced at the beast, realizing they were now bound by something unspoken, allies forged not by training or command, but by survival itself. The men raised their weapons again, stepping closer, the tension wound tighter than a drawn bowstring. as the clearing braced for the strike that was certain to come. The three poachers fanned out, forming a rough semicircle. Their rifles raised as they closed in. The horse pawed the ground again, its head low, its muscles rippling with tension. Elara stood between them, clutching her knife. Though she knew it was no match against bullets, her eyes darted from one man to another, searching for an opening. Her body still aching, but her spirit unwilling to yield. The leader barked an order, demanding she step aside, promising to spare her if she surrendered the animal, but Elara did not move. She tightened her grip on the blade and shouted back her refusal, her voice raw with fury. She knew men like these had broken the balance of the forest with their greed, and if she surrendered now, she would be complicit in their cruelty. The horse seemed to sense her resolve, for it edged closer as if bracing to strike alongside her. One of the poachers lunged forward, too eager, too reckless, his rifle, barrels swinging toward the horse. The shot fired with a deafening crack, smoke filling the air. Elara cried out in horror, but the bullet missed, striking only the earth. As the horse moved with blinding speed, it reared high, its hooves crashing down on the weapon, sending it shattering into the mud. The poacher stumbled back weaponless, his eyes wide with fear. The leader cursed, raising his own rifle, but Elara acted before he could aim. She hurled herself at him, knife flashing, though her body trembled from the effort. The blade grazed his arm, forcing him to stumble. His shot fired wild into the branches. Above, birds burst into flight, their cries echoing as chaos erupted in the clearing. The horse charged again, forcing the third poacher to dive aside to avoid being trampled. Elara rolled to the ground, gasping for breath, her knife still in hand. She could see the leader recovering, his face twisted in rage. He shouted for his men to regroup, but panic was clear in their movements. One crawled through the mud, scrambling for a weapon, while the other clutched his injured arm. The giant horse loomed over them, striking the ground with its hooves, each impact a warning that shook the forest itself. The leader tried again, raising his rifle toward the horse, but Elara threw herself forward once more, slamming into him with all the strength she could muster. They both crashed to the ground, the rifle tumbling from his grip into the dirt. Elara fought desperately, holding the blade against his chest, though her hands shook violently. He snarled, shoving her back, his strength overpowering her as he reached for the weapon again. Before he could grasp it, the horse surged forward, its massive hoof slamming down inches from the weapon. The leader froze, staring up at the towering beast as if struck by the realization of his own fragility, the air thick with the raw power of the animal. Elara pushed herself back to her knees, knife still ready, but it was the horse that held the attention of every man in the clearing. The two unarmed poachers dragged themselves toward the edge of the forest, their courage broken. Their leader cursed them, shouting for them to stand and fight, but his words fell on deaf ears as they vanished into the trees, leaving him alone with the ranger and the creature that now seemed more legend than animal. Elara wiped blood from her face, her chest heaving as she stared him down. The leader spat into the dirt, his pride refusing to let him retreat. He lunged again, this time straight for Elara, his hands reaching for her throat, but the horse reacted faster than she could breathe. Its body swung sideways, and its shoulder crashed into the man, sending him sprawling across the ground. He landed, hard, gasping in pain as the knife slipped from her hand and landed beside him. Elara scrambled forward, seizing the blade again before he could reach it, her arm raised though her strength waned, her eyes locked on him, her breath ragged. She did not strike. Instead, she pressed the edge against his chest, forcing him to freeze. The horse stood above them both, its breath heavy, its eyes burning with wild intensity as if daring the man to move. The forest fell silent again, broken only by the sound of the poacher's shallow breaths and the steady rhythm of the horse's lungs. Elara finally lowered the blade, though her gaze never left his. She ordered him to leave, to vanish from the mountains, and never return, and the weight of the beast beside her made her words carry the weight of truth. The man staggered to his feet, clutching his bruised side, and stumbled into the darkness of the trees, his retreat echoing with shame. Ilara collapsed onto the ground, the knife falling from her, hand exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. The horse lowered its head once more, nuzzling her shoulder with a gentleness that defied its size. She reached up weakly, resting her palm against its muzzle, and for the first time since the fall, she allowed herself to breathe fully. She realized the bond forged in danger had become something far greater than survival. As the first light of dawn broke through the canopy, the giant horse stood silently at her side like a guardian carved from the earth itself. Ilara closed her eyes against the warmth of the rising sun, her body battered, but her spirit unbroken, and she knew deep down that this day would mark the beginning of a story that no one who heard it would ever believe.